Good evening. You're watching The Right Stand here on CNN News 18 with me, Poonam Burde. Before we get into the big debate tonight, let me take you through some of the highlights of the day, and let's begin with the Prime Minister lauding our Asian champs. He interacted with the entire contingent of the Asian Games at the Major Dhyan Chand Stadium here in New Delhi. Prime Minister Modi used the common lingo GOAT, greatest of all time, to describe the Indian team, all of them who won accolades for the country. Shubman Gill has been discharged from the hospital. He had a dengue scare. He spent a night in the hospital, but unfortunately, he's not going to be playing the next two matches, is what we're learning. Remember, the next match in the ICC ODI World Cup is tomorrow. India plays Afghanistan, and then, of course, the big clash against Pakistan on Saturday. Shubman Gill is expected to miss that as well. Federation of Automobile Dealers Associations have said that the automobile retail sales have seen a significant jump, a 21% increase last month. It has reached 18.8 lakh units from 15 lakh. This is, of course, due to the festival season that's approaching as well. First Dussehra and then Diwali. Two-wheeler sales have grown by 21% and three-wheeler by 45% is what the association has now come out and revealed. In fact, there are new firms that are also coming up, and they too are booming, and so is the Indian economy. Government data has revealed that over 14,000 new companies were incorporated in just the month of September. It marks a rise of 3% over a year ago. About 40% of firms have an authorized capital of 1 lakh, indicating that micro and small enterprises are the fastest ones to grow. They're the fastest ones to expand, and that's really where India's growth story lies. Those were the highlights that we got for you, but on to now the story that has grabbed headlines and eyeballs across the world for the last 4 days. It is Hamas's attack on Israel and the counter-offensive that Israel, the Netanyahu government, has now unleashed. It is not going to stop, is Netanyahu's clear message, until Hamas is destroyed. The death toll has surpassed 2,400 in the region, is what we're learning. 900 only on the Israeli side. More than 5,000 rockets have been fired from the Gaza Strip towards Israel since Saturday morning, the first of the attacks that took place at the music festival. The sound of air raid sirens is routine now to several citizens of Israel. Hunkering down for safety, unfortunately, is their new normal. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is putting together an emergency national government with members of the opposition too. It would unify the country at the time of such a crisis against a common enemy, he says, which would only signal a more robust response from here on as far as fighting the Hamas is concerned. Let me take you through some of the defining moments of this war and what exactly has transpired in the last 4 days. Satellite images have now come to the fore. They show dozens of fires near the border, especially at the Gaza Strip. The images reveal the devastating impact due to this conflict that we've seen, and it's just been 4 days. There is no let up. These are the fires that you see that satellite images are now throwing up. Thick columns of black smoke hung over Gaza's skyline once again. They've been there for days and nights now. Israel bombarded the coastal enclave for a 4th straight day. Several buildings were reduced to rubble. There was dust. There were many lives that have been lost. This footage shows the impact that it's had as far as the Gaza Strip is concerned, one of very densely populated areas in that region. A heart-wrenching video has also surfaced, like many, unfortunately, that have come to the fore from this region. It has surfaced, which shows a father's heroic efforts to save his entire family from terrorists. This footage shows this man guiding his family to safety. There is a small window through which he is guiding every single member of his family out to safety. Unfortunately, when it was his turn to move out, he was shot by Hamas terrorists. He did not survive. Burnt cars, destroyed homes, dead bodies are now a routine in many parts of Israel. This is one of the kibbutz in Israel where these scenes came to the fore from. 10% of the kibbutz population was found dead. Israeli troops were going from house to retrieve these bodies. There were bodies of residents. Many were found inside their burnt homes, which soldiers bagged and then carried onto the back of the trucks to ensure that there is a proper burial that is given to them. There is dignity in death, even at the time of such a crisis, even at the time of such a conflict. Survivor accounts are coming to the fore. Several people have been taken hostage, not just Israeli nationals, but foreign nationals as well. Their families are waiting for miracle stories to happen. Some of them have survived. They've come out of this conflict. Listening to their testimonies.
Seriously, it's really living hell. Never seen something like this. I've been in two wars in my life, and never seen anything like this. Bodies, all places, for the slaughter. They slaughter us there. They didn't care if you are a man or a woman, you are young or old man. They are killers, they are murderers.
Very hard to put it in words. There are a lot of emotions, a lot of anger, a lot of shock, a lot of mourning. Horrible what's happening to our beautiful little country.
We don't tell them to come to do that. There's animals, it's not Arab. And the Quran, they said they don't need to kill. No kids, no ladies. And they kill kids and ladies.
The thing I want the most is to wake up from this nightmare, to forget it had all happened. Everything was so amazing, the best party I've been to in my life, until it went from paradise to hell in 1 second.
The IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces, have now come out and said that they've killed Hamas's Minister of Economy. That's the latest setback that has come to the fore from Israel's side for Hamas as far as this counteroffensive goes. This happened in an overnight strike at the Gaza Strip. But let's take a look at what exactly the casualty figures have been, what the war has really cost in just the last 4 days. 2,600 Israelis have been injured so far. The number, of course, is going to be much higher because the search is still on for those who perhaps are trapped under the debris and the rubble. 900 or so Israelis have been killed in the last 4 days. Israel has reacted, Israel has retaliated in equal measure as well, which is why casualties, civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip in that region too is very, very high, close to 700 now. Palestinians that have been injured are over 4,000 at last count. Hostages have been taken by Hamas as well, at least 100. We do not yet know if they are just Israeli nationals or if they are foreign nationals as well. Terrorists so far killed are 1,500 plus. That's what the Israeli government has come out and confirmed, that retaliation will continue, that counteroffensive will only get more robust. We're given to understand that at least 300,000 reservists have been called in by Israel. Complete decimation of Hamas is on Benjamin Netanyahu's mind. He wants this to serve as a deterrent so that no one dares to launch such an audacious attack again. Listen in to that declaration coming in from the Israeli Prime Minister.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless. Once the Jewish people were defenseless. No longer. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
A brutal slaughter of civilians. We saw slaughter of children, women, teenagers, entire families, mother, father, children, all of them together. That murder, it's an evil that not created even by the devil.
Now, Israel has unleashed its Operation Iron Swords against the Hamas terror group. But what are the major conflicts that we've seen so far? Let me tell you more about this. Gaza, also known as the Gaza Strip, is home to about 2 million Palestinians, many of them displaced after leaving or being driven from Israel during the War of Independence. West Bank is situated in the east of Israel. It's home to about 3 million Palestinians, of which most of them are Muslim Arabs. The West Bank contains a number of Jewish holy sites, which was visited by thousands of pilgrims every single year. This is the kind of conflict that we've seen. These are the two zones as far as putting this entire region into context is concerned. Now, the world is standing by Israel at such a time. We've seen the casualty figures only go higher. India stands steadfastly with Israel as they take stock of the terror strike. There is no other way to describe that. Hamas did what they did on Saturday. It is a terrorist act, plain and simple. Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, spoke to his Israeli counterpart over the phone. He said that India condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. He even thanked Benjamin Netanyahu for providing an update on the ongoing situation. The Western world too stood united with Israel. Heads of state from the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France and Italy this morning issued a joint statement. They reiterated their support. They asserted that terrorist actions of Hamas have absolutely no justification. They have no legitimacy and must be universally condemned. Listen in to some of those reactions. But before we get to that, let's cut across straight and open this up for debate of what exactly is up next. What is up next for Israel? What is going to be the impact on the world? Daniel Carmon, former ambassador of Israel to India, joining us here on this broadcast. Jay Engelmeyer, publisher and executive editor of The Judean, with us as well. Anat Bernstein-Reich, president of Israel Asia Chair, joining us here on this broadcast as well. Ashok Sajjanhar, former Indian diplomat, with me too. Let me open this up and begin by asking the former ambassador of Israel to India. Mr. Daniel Carmon, I want to ask you, the world is standing by Israel at such a time. India too has been condemning what happened on Saturday, ensuring that our support stays with Israel. The Prime Minister has spoken with his counterpart. Where do you see this going forward in terms of what really stands as far as West Asia and the other countries that are involved are concerned?
Well, I would like, thank you very much for having me, and I want to really congratulate you on this introduction, because you really gave a very thorough picture of what is going on. We have been used, the world has been used during the past 20 years to rounds of hostilities between Hamas, a terrorist organization, financed, trained, backed by Iran, a member state of the international community, who has one idea, which is to wipe out the state of Israel and its citizens. The same Iran doesn't care, doesn't give a damn, excuse me the expression, doesn't give a damn about the Palestinian issue. But it is using a proxy called Hamas, again financing it and encouraging it to do the job as a proxy. And we've been used during the last 20 years to rounds of hostilities that always ended in some kind of arrangement. We all knew the arrangement was temporary, and then a few months later, another round. This has to stop, especially when what happened on Saturday is not one more round. It is definitely a declaration of war, infiltrating into Israeli territory, holding 20 or so sites, kibbutzim, towns, localities, and army bases. The failure there is huge. But we are now in the stage of regaining control. But still, there are thousands of rockets launched. I am now in my safe room. We had 3 barrages in central Israel near Tel Aviv, and I'm here because it can happen any time now. This is not another round. This is a war, and the war will be fought like a war.
In your opinion, Mr. Carmon, I want to ask you though, not to draw a direct comparison, but we've just seen a war a year and a half ago as far as Ukraine and Russia is concerned. No one thought that would drag on for a year and a half either. How far do you think this one is going to drag on for? We have seen Benjamin Netanyahu, several others within his government come out and vow vengeance, come out vow retribution. But how long do you think this is going to draw out for?
It won't take a day or two. It will take more than that. I'm not a military expert, but since we're not talking about another round with mediators from Egypt or Qatar or wherever coming and helping out to make an arrangement that will last 6 months or 8 months, this time the Hamas capabilities, and you have quoted the leaders, and I think it's also logically right after what we have seen, this atrocity, this mass murder, this October massacre, this will not continue. Hamas military capability will have to be eliminated. How long will it take? I don't know. It's definitely not a day or two, because we are still in the defensive offensive of making sure that our army takes full. It's ridiculous, but takes control over sites that were not conquered, but they were taken temporarily by the terrorists. 1,500 terrorists entered the territory of Israel, like Daesh was doing, ISIS, like ISIS was doing in the desert, in the Arabian desert. This is how the Hamas acted in the localities and the army bases near the Gaza Strip. This is really an incredible occurrence, and it will be responded by the war like I said before, the war will be fought like in a war.
Jay Engelmeyer, I want to get you in. Many have called this the ISIS of Israel, but what really does it mean for the ordinary Israelis who are living this nightmare for the last 4 days, who do not know when this nightmare is going to end?
Well, I mean, Israelis are very resilient. If you know any Israelis, you'd understand that whether they had a political divide on Friday, whether they had an emotional divide with somebody on Friday, that divide ended on Saturday morning. The country is unified. What does it mean in terms of fear for the nation? The nation is fearful, of course, but at the same time, we're resilient and we're doing everything we possibly can. I just want to share a little bit of a story. My son, who has friends who just got called up for reserve duty, went to the grocery store, bought several hundred shekel worth of groceries, and delivered them to an NGO that was bringing it down to the soldiers down there. We have my daughter who went and packaged up clothing and equipment for soldiers, for lone soldiers who do not have specialized equipment or things to make them comfortable. Her and her friends gathered up and put boxes together and sent them down as well. So the nation itself is occupying itself with what's going on by making sure that everybody can contribute to the effort in order to make this happen, so that the soldiers can accomplish what they need to accomplish in the quickest amount of time. That being said, there is a tremendous outpouring of support for what is going on within Israel. Even the people who are against this government, even the people who were pro-Palestinian. I've heard from several friends of mine who were very anti-Israel in terms of the way we handle Palestinians or we manage Palestinian affairs, who have completely switched over because of the imagery, not that Israel was putting out, but by Hamas was putting out themselves. They were boasting on social media. You have elderly men and women who are lined up and shot in the head. You have women and girls who are raped, and they put this on video and they send it out. Some of these women were raped so brutally, you could see the blood running between their legs in these videos. And I think it's those images that kind of shocked people who are on the far left, kind of more to the center, and realized that this is not a conversation that needs to be had in terms of how do we treat another population. I have to add that this population is living in its own sovereign entity. It's not part of Israel. Gaza is its own area, and just like any other country, Israel does not have to let everybody it wants to come into the country, neither does Egypt. So to call it an open-air prison is a little wrong, but I've had people who have been calling it an open-air prison walk that back and say this is not an open-air prison, this was a hub for terror. And these were people who are on the far left. So I think it's important that your viewers understand that within Israel itself, I would say about 85 to 90% of the country backs whatever the government is doing at this point in time, and they are actually actively trying to help make the soldiers' lives easier.
And we often see the kind of narrative coming in from several think tanks, from several academicians as well, Anat Bernstein-Reich, that, Israel has always played the victim, but really it's the oppressor. Let's keep that narrative aside. What has happened over the last 4 days, what happened on Saturday, innocent civilians, foreign nationals being caught in the crossfire, that is terror, plain and simple. There cannot be any justification for that.
Totally agree with you. I mean, Saturday, we had terrible days in our history, but Saturday, I think, was one of the worst. On Friday, we had 6 October, which is 50 years to the Yom Kippur War, to the 73 war. And in the past 1 month in Israel, we are all the time talking about the omission of Yom Kippur, and it will never happen again. So a day after, on Saturday, which is like what we had 50 years back, we had the same awful surprise in all fronts. It came to us on a surprise in a holiday also. It was the Sukkot holiday, the last day of the Jewish holidays, the New Year holidays. And initially we thought that it's just rockets. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning. I'm used to it. Like Ambassador Carmon, I'm talking to you from my safe room. because any minute there can be a siren, and then my family will enter in and I'll introduce them to you. And this is reality. But as the time passed, we understood what is really happening. The rockets was just something that actually blocked our eyes to see the real story of the infiltration and taking over of 22, to the best of my memory, villages, moshav, cities, people, army bases, and then we realized the problem and the unheard of, something that, as Jay said, atrocities. And initially we didn't understand what is happening. Only Sunday, gradually, we started to see the clips, and honestly, it's hard to see. In Israel, they don't show it to you on the television. Only on social media we are able to see something, and I'm not sure that we want to see, although we do want the world to see. We do want the world to see who is the enemy here, who is the victim, and who is the attacker. We are the victim in this situation, but we were not victim for long, okay? You can hear the fighter jets just in the background, and they're going to hit the Hamas in Gaza. And you asked the Ambassador Carmon, how much will it take? And we say here, as much as it takes. As much as it takes. We have a resilient nation. You should see outside there what is happening. People, as Jay said, are collecting stuff for the soldiers. We forgot that we had a big conflict in the past 40 weeks, and we are united. We are supporting the government, the united government, the coalition government that is now being formed to fight the enemy once and for all. I mean, there should be a solution. I'm not telling you which solution, but there should be a solution. And I think that your viewers should be aware that Iran, which is a friend of India, is behind a lot of it. And you need to know who are your friends.
Sure, the bloodshed needs to end, and it needs to end on both sides, because it's innocent civilians that unfortunately are caught in the crossfire. They are the collateral damage, and that really needs to stop, irrespective of whose agenda is being furthered and who is being used as a pawn in what bigger scheme of things. But we're talking about the kind of the barbarity that we've seen. And Jay Engelmeyer, I want to get you in on that as well. How did this actually happen? A coordinated attack, land, sea, air is what we saw as far as the Saturday and the weekend was concerned. But how did Israel not see this coming? That's a question that many are asking today.
I think Israel saw it coming. Israel was warned. We were getting warnings for weeks, if not months on end, that something big was coming, and we did expect it to happen around the holiday season. I think they surprised us because up until this point, Hamas was a one-trick pony. Hamas had the missiles, and we react to the missiles. We did not expect the paragliders to come in. There's a lot of information out there, and I honestly cannot speak to it because I'm not a military person, and there's some things that I cannot speak to because it has not been cleared for publication. But at this point in time, I have to say that that kind of attack would have surprised any nation, even the most prepared nation. There were some reports out there saying in some cases there were 80 simultaneous attacks going on, which would actually spread the forces down there very, very thin, which would allow what happened to happen. So I think that, we have to leave it at that.
Sure. Ashok Sajanhar, Indian diplomat, former diplomat, joining us here on this broadcast as well. Thank you patiently for waiting up until we've had the conversation around West Asia and Israel. But Ashok Sajanhar, I want to talk to you about the Indian stance and what really is at stake as far as India is concerned. There is a lot of trade, there is a lot of investment. The Middle East, Europe corridor and India corridor that we just happened to sign during G20, that's also at stake, many would say. India's stance and the shift in the stance that we've seen as far as this conflict or Israel is concerned, how do you see that? How, in your opinion, has that changed?
I think India has taken a very decisive, taken a very important decision in this at this moment. And I'm really proud that, Prime Minister Modi Within 4 days, he has come out with 2 tweets and expressing full support of the people of India for Israel. Now, Poonam, you right at the beginning, you said that the whole world is standing with Israel. I would really have, been happier if the world had been more open about it, more, like what India has done. I think India has, there are so many other countries who have been, speaking in double terms, in terms of, speaking about what the Palestinians also, they need their rights, they need a solution, and of course condemning this. So, they are trying to balance whatever they have had to say. But India has been very, very clear, very, very categorical, and I'm really very happy about it. I'm very proud about it. The point that you make about, all these aspects, whether it is the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or it is the I2U2, or it is the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I think this was one of the aspects of the Hamas attack, that it wanted to shift the focus and it wanted to sort of, really give that a big jolt. So if we really want to work against what the Hamas has done, I think their coming days and weeks, possibly months also, the focus as far as Israel is concerned is going to be on dealing with the immediate problem at hand and taking care of it. But I think we need to also, in parallel, keep working at it. I think some of the statements that have come from the UAE, and also I would say to an extent from Saudi Arabia, although they have said that, no further dialogue, no further conversation on normalization of relations with Israel. I don't think anything else could have really been expected under the circumstances from Saudi Arabia. So, that also, once the things come a little under control as far as Israeli action against the Hamas is concerned, I think we need to pick up those ends also and start moving forward so that there is not too much of delay, because I think this is what really, connectivity is what really builds trust. Yes. Connectivity is what builds confidence. And that is what we need to do as far as the Middle Eastern region is concerned. And we've been moving in that direction. So we shouldn't be slackening the pace.
Sure.
But once this immediate issue is taken care of, I think take it forward with similar energy.
Sure. Daniel Carbone, I want to ask you, you've been a former ambassador to India, which is why I want to ask you this. India was one of the first non-Arab states to recognize the Palestine Liberation Organization. It was also one of the last non-Muslim nations to recognize Israel. From then to what we've seen now, to the Indian Prime Minister now unequivocally taking a stand and saying that terror has to be condemned, we stand with Israel. How do you see that? Do you see a remarkable shift as far as India and Israel's ties are concerned, or India's strategy on Israel is concerned?
Well, it is striking that we heard those votes of friendship and confidence after and solidarity after this terrible attack on my country. But regardless of this crisis, I have to tell you that India and Israel are going through an incredible journey of rapprochement between them, between 1992 or maybe a little before that to 2014 and up to date. And at 2014, the new government at the time has set up a policy which was a very simple policy, a model for other countries too, saying, for us, we can have very good relations with Israel, our partner in technology, in agriculture, in water, in trade, and we can commit ourselves to the Palestinian people. And there is no contradiction between the two. And this policy guides the Indian government, and it is totally not only accepted but welcomed by Israel, because we understand that the Palestinian people must have some friends in the world, and it's fine, as long as it doesn't interfere with relationship and friendship with other countries like Israel. And India has set a model, and I hope other countries will copy this model. It's okay to have relations with both sides. There is no contradiction whatsoever. And I only can congratulate India's foreign policy for doing so.
Ms. Burstenreich, do you agree as well? We've seen the kind of stance that the rest of the Western world has taken. We've seen the cautious stance that Russia has taken, not really condemning this terror attack that we've seen from Hamas' side. And then you have India, which is perhaps leading by example, like the ambassador was also pointing out.
Well, the fact that Russia didn't condemn fully, we can understand, and I don't think that's the issue. The rest of the world is condemning. You've seen the German, you've seen the French, you've seen the Canadians, and US. And in the background, I see the supply that is sent to us by Mr. Biden. So all of that's just clear. And India is, we all know, becoming a world leader. And as a world leader, India is giving an example to the rest of the world, and especially the region. And it's very, I would say, commendable from Prime Minister Modi to stand very clearly and condemn it. And if you're not condemning what we've seen, something is wrong, okay? I mean, the atrocities of this incident, I mean, I don't think that any leader of the free world will not condemn such an attack. I mean, it's not, let's say that we shouldn't be surprised that people are condemning it, especially India, which is such a close ally to Israel. The kind of friendship that exists between our nation over the past since '92 is amazing. Yes. And I would be surprised if India wouldn't have done it.
Can I add something on this point?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
When I said it is striking, historically, for reasons that India has on its own, India was never too quick, even after 1992, even after 2014. India was not too quick in condemning terrorist acts within Israel. That's a fact.
So in that sense, that's the striking factor as far as as India's this response is concerned. Unfortunately, I have to leave it at that. What the impact of this is going to be on West Asia, the world is watching. But I thank you all for joining us here on this broadcast with your perspective. The war continues, though Israel is only doubling down. And a spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces, Major Libby Weiss, is joining us here on this broadcast. Major, thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Let me begin by asking you, we've had the Israeli Prime Minister come out and say that we didn't start the war, it was forced on us, but we are going to end it and we will finish it. In your opinion, how long do you see this dragging on for?
Well, at this stage, really our focus is on continuing to secure Israeli communities along the Gaza border, and of course to make sure that Hamas cannot keep attacking Israel, whether that's through infiltrations, whether that's through launching rockets. And we anticipate that this is going to be a long operation, that this will take time. But of course, we are committed as ever to securing our residents and fighting for our homes and for our loved ones.
Having said that, many people have been taken hostages. Many Israeli nationals, many foreign nationals were taken hostage as well. If you could give us a sense of what exactly is happening on that front, the kind of cooperation that's happening with these other countries as well?
Absolutely. So first, I have to say on a personal level that we are just devastated and horrified, and everyone in this country is hearing these stories, and our hearts are with the families and the friends of these hostages, seeing the elderly, seeing children, seeing young people just taken like this is horrific. It is a war crime, and it is something that is truly haunting every one of us. Of course, within the IDF, we are focused on being able to bring them back home. We have appointed 2 generals to coordinate both within the military and with the families, and to share as much information as we have that is accurate with the people that need to know that. And I should say that first and foremost, the fastest way to have these hostages released is for Hamas to do that immediately. For Hamas to do that without any conditions, without any terms, and to let these people return home.
Major Weiss, we've heard the latest that has come to the fore as far as the IDF's counter-offensive or the operation is concerned, that the Minister of Economy of Hamas has been killed. The casualties, the fatalities that we've seen on Hamas's side are much, much higher. How big a boost do you think this is in you doubling down and ensuring that there is complete decimation, as Benjamin Netanyahu put, as far as Hamas is concerned?
I'm sorry, do you mind just repeating that? The audio here is a little bit cut up.
Sure. Major Weiss, I was asking you, the IDF has confirmed or has come out and said that the Minister of Economy of Hamas has been gunned down. The casualties, the figure on Hamas's side is much, much higher. How big of a boost do you think this is for you and the operation that you and your country are leading?
Well, first I have to say, and this is something that we have always taken as a policy of the IDF, which is that we are striking Hamas military targets within the Gaza Strip. And the reason that we are doing that is to make sure that they cannot continue attacking Israel. So we have been striking weapons caches, launching sites, places where they have been planning these attacks and other sorts of attacks, command and control centers. These are the targets that we are striking. And of course, we have warned the world for years that Hamas uses its population, its civilian population, as human shields. And we are doing what we can in a very complex operational reality to try and minimize the impact on civilians. But of course, we need to strike Hamas. There is no other option for us. And you know, I can't imagine that anyone else on anywhere in the world would tell us that we shouldn't be doing this.
Absolutely. And the world, most of the Western countries have also come out and said that Israel does have the right to defend itself and has completely stood with the kind of action that is being initiated by you, by your government, by the military forces there. But the counter argument to that is also that it's always the civilians, the innocents, the unarmed that are caught in the crossfire, and they are collateral damage. That would be true of those living in the Gaza Strip as well.
Again, we, in such contrast to Hamas, we have no interest in harming civilians. And I think we need to go back to how this whole event started. This event started on Saturday with a massacre of civilians in Israel. This is the biggest massacre of civilians since the establishment of the country. More than 900 people have been killed. And the responsibility of what takes place in Gaza now, that is on Hamas. That is on Hamas for launching this horrific attack and for their continued investment in terror against Israel.
Major Weiss, one last question before I let you go. You know, many say that this is something that Israel should have seen coming. It caught them by surprise. It caught you by surprise. But that really is not how it should have gone. How do you respond to that kind of criticism that's coming to the fore, where people are talking about fixing accountability, fixing blame as far as intelligence failure is concerned?
I think those are important questions. I have to say that right now, though, the focus is on the war that is taking place as we speak. Once we are past that, and of course that will take time, then there's no question that we will have to provide those answers. The country, everybody will have to provide those answers. Right now, though, of course, the focus is on restoring peace, making sure that our citizens are safe, that hostages are released, and that we can conclude this war, which again will take time. And that's where our focus is right now.
We really do hope that this bloodshed ends at the earliest, because irrespective of which side the casualties are on, innocent lives are being lost, and there really needs to be an end to that. But Major Libby Weiss, thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Israel, of course, is going to be doubling down as far as its counteroffensive is concerned. But Palestine believes that Israel has always been the oppressor and will always remain to be. This is not a terror strike, is what they say. This is resistance. So let me open this up to Azam Tamimi, who's a British Palestinian Jordanian academician. He joins us on this broadcast. So thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Let me begin by asking you, you know, the oppressor-victim narrative, who's the oppressor, who's the victim, that really differs based on who you talk to. But do you agree with the assault that we saw on Saturday and what, of course, followed after that? Do you believe this is the way forward as far as the issue between Israel and Palestine is concerned?
Well, if you imprison people for 17 years and you control their lives, controlling when they can have electricity and when they cannot, when they can have water and when they cannot, when they can have milk for their children and when they cannot, eventually they explode. This is a spontaneous reaction to oppression.
Sure, you say this is a spontaneous reaction to oppression, but let me quote from what the Hamas Charter says. The 1988 Charter says that Israel will exist and continue to exist only until Islam will obliterate it. Do you think this is the sentiment that all Palestinians harbor? And if not, then do you think attacks like these are only counterproductive to that bigger cause?
Yeah, why do we have a conflict? The problem is that people don't have time to try and understand why we have a conflict. We have a conflict because one day my mother was driven out of her house, my father was driven out of his land, and these Jewish immigrants came from Europe to escape persecution by the European Christians, took our land and took our homes and created a state for themselves and left us in the refugee camps. This is how the conflict started.
And the conflict started decades ago. It's been going on for decades now. So what do you think is the way forward then? Is there a solution that you see in the near future? Is there? And if it is, then what is that solution?
The Palestinians have tried so many times with the Israelis, and Yasser Arafat went into a deal with them in Oslo in the hope that they would allow him to have a Palestinian state. Eventually, they were only interested in turning the PLO into a Palestinian authority that becomes a security agency for the Zionist occupation. Occupation never ended. The West Bank is still under occupation. Gaza is still under siege. And therefore, the Palestinians have been left with no other means to regain their independence and freedom.
Sure, but is conflict the answer? Is conflict the way forward? And I keep coming back to that because we've seen this begin Saturday early morning. It's been 4 days and there's absolutely no let up in the war. In fact, it's only going to escalate now because Israel and the Israeli Prime Minister have come out and said that we are going to put an end to this war. How do you think this is going to fare for the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire on both sides?
Well, you see, for the Palestinians rotting in refugee camps for 57 years, or for really 75 years now for some of them, is not a life. Is not a life worth adhering to. Well, it is regrettable that there is so much bloodshed, but this bloodshed is caused by the continuation of occupation. Therefore, to answer your question, the solution to this problem begins with ending the occupation. The Israelis now have a government which is so right-wing, which mixes secular Zionism with religious Judaism in order to come up with a very combustive cocktail. They don't want to give the Palestinians any right. They don't recognize them. They continue to dispossess them. They continue to build settlements or expand existing ones. And now they want to take our mosque even, Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Every week there are attempts to enter into the mosque, to desecrate it. Some of them hope to bring it down and establish their own temple. The problem is that these guys came from Europe at a time when they were persecuted there, and now they believe they can remain there permanently, take our land, take our mosques, and just forget about us because they have all the support they need from the United States of America and from its Western allies. You put yourself in the shoes of the Palestinians. What can they do? Continue to live in humiliation? Continue to live without dignity? Continue to live without prospects for your children? Or resist? The Vietnamese people resisted before us and they won. The Algerian people resisted before us and they won. The people of South Africa resisted until they brought an end to apartheid. And this Israeli government combines colonialism with apartheid altogether. You can see now what the Palestinians are facing.
Sure, you call it resistance, sir, but this is what is being tagged as terror. It's a terror act. Innocents were harmed, innocents were targeted by Hamas on Saturday morning, which triggered this recent conflict. How do you respond to that?
Of course, your enemy would try to discredit you in whatever ways they can. There was a time, and I was a student at the time in the United Kingdom, when Margaret Thatcher called Nelson Mandela a terrorist, and she vowed that Nelson Mandela would never set foot on British soil. An enemy can call their opponents whatever they like. What really matters to us is that we, the Palestinians, are the victims. The British enabled the Zionist movement to establish a homeland on our land, in our homes. This is a fact of history that cannot be changed.
Sure, but do you think, coming back to what I was asking you earlier, that does the Hamas represent all of the Palestinian cause? And if not, then isn't this counterproductive? Also then, don't you think that Hamas, and by extension Palestine, as many in the world view it, is becoming a pawn in the hands of countries like Iran, who perhaps are just furthering their own agenda?
Well, Iran has nothing really to do with this. Probably Iran has its own agenda. Israel, some other parties have their own agendas. What really matters for the Palestinians is that they want to be recognized as the victims in this conflict. And this can be done peacefully. As I explained in my book about Hamas, the best way to do this is to start with a long-term truce. Okay, let's stop the bloodshed and let's disengage and let's negotiate truly with honesty, ending the occupation as a starting point. Then probably in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, when we have peace for that period of time, my grandchildren and the grandchildren of the settlers who are living in my father's land and in my mother's house may decide to coexist together peacefully. Who knows? Let's put an end to the bloodshed. The Israelis have never accepted this. And I've challenged many Israeli politicians. I met so many of them in past years and told them this is the way forward. Recognize Hamas as a representative, at least part of the Palestinians, because it was elected democratically in 2006. Negotiate with Hamas, and Hamas is willing to agree to a long-term truce. Now, once we have that long-term truce, let the next generations decide what they want to do with their lives.
Sure, what the solution is not for me to say, but one thing we can all agree on is that there needs to be an end to the bloodshed. And that end needs to happen sooner than later, because this has gone on for decades, and unfortunately the unarmed innocent civilians are the ones that are losing their lives, that are caught in the crossfire of this dispute that continues. But I thank you, Azam Tamimi, for joining us here on this broadcast on CNN News 18 with your perspective. With that, it's time for a quick break here on this edition. But on the other side, we are going to get you an exclusive ground report from the conflict zone, from the war zone. Do stay tuned for that. What a holiday!
Saturday's attack by Hamas marked the worst breach in Israel's defenses in decades. According to a Reuters source, Hamas deployed a force of about 1,000 fighters, organized into specialized units. They've been training in Gaza since the last conflict in 2021, sometimes in plain sight, the source said. Here's how they managed to catch Israel off guard. This footage released by the armed wing of Hamas is said to show fighters training ahead of the operation. They're using paragliders, and a source says their exercises included building a mock Israeli settlement to practice a military landing. Reuters could not verify the date and locations of the videos, but the training would have come amid a careful campaign of deception by Hamas, which had convinced Israel that it did not want to fight. It refrained from military operations against Israel and was careful about leaks. Even many Hamas leaders weren't aware of the plans, according to the Reuters source. A spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces admits they were surprised. Hamas separated its fighters into several specialized groups to carry out the attack in the air and on the ground. It fired thousands of rockets at around 6:30 a.m. on Saturday. The bombardment was intended to cause shock and confusion, while providing Hamas fighters with cover to break the fortified fence surrounding Gaza. Teams of fighters on hang gliders, or motorized paragliders, flew over the border and secured terrain for the main ground assault. A 400-strong elite force on the ground attacked the fortified Gaza fence. Videos issued by Hamas are said to show fighters breaching the security fences. It also released video of drones it says it used for border surveillance. The final part involved moving hostages to Gaza, mostly achieved early in the attack, a source close to Hamas said. In one well-publicized hostage-taking, fighters abducted partygoers fleeing a rave near the kibbutz of Re'im near Gaza. One analyst told Reuters that Hamas probably succeeded beyond their expectation, but now they'll have to, quote, deal with an Israel determined to decimate them.
सायरन की आवाज़ें आप सुन सकते हैं। ये सायरन की आवाज़ें, जब सायरन की आवाज़ें होती हैं तो तमाम गाड़ियां, हम लोग भी रुक गए, आप देख सकते हैं। हमारे कैमरा पर्सन करमपा जी, हम लोग भी उतर रहे हैं। गाड़ी से हम लोग उतरेंगे क्योंकि जैसे ही सायरन की आवाज़ आती है, ये आप देख सकते हैं बमबाजी के रॉकेट आप देख सकते हैं, करम रॉकेट, यहाँ धुआं आप देख सकते हैं। किस तरह से वॉर एरिया में न्यूज़ 18 इंडिया की टीम वॉर एरिया में है और किस तरह का माहौल है वो आप देख सकते हैं। ये बिल्कुल वॉर जोन है, लगातार मिसाइल से हमला किया जा रहा है। इजराइल और हमास के बीच में जो स्थिति है, न्यूज़ 18 इंडिया की टीम न्यूज़ 18 इंडिया की टीम आपको लगातार किस तरह का माहौल है वो यहाँ आपको देखने को मिल रहा है। देख सकते हैं इधर यहीं से धमाका हुआ, हम लोग ये शीशे टूटे, अभी मिसाइल से हमला हुआ है। ये लगातार सड़कों पे इस तरह के माहौल, करम आप उधर की तस्वीरें दिखाई, ये देख सकते पूरा का पूरा धुआं है। बीच बीच में सैकड़ों की संख्या में रॉकेट छोड़े जाते, इधर की तस्वीरें दिखाइए।
This is the shopping center of Sderot, one of the border towns that came under attack, and you can hear military helicopters buzzing overhead. There's intermittent sound of rocket firing and bombs going off in the distance. So this place remains very tense, and this is the site of one of the rocket attacks. One of the Hamas rockets fell on this car, and this is what remains of it. Metal and glass splintered everywhere. It has been completely gutted, this vehicle. The situation remains very tense still in this town. People are stocking up on supplies, and this is a town of some 30,000 people. In the last few days, it has seen more than 100 rockets being fired from Gaza.
तमाम लोग सड़क पे देख रहे हैं, वहाँ आप देख सकते हैं एस्केलोन में अपनी गाड़ियों को रोक के लोग उतर गए थे और वो शेल्टर ले लिए थे। हम भी यहाँ बैठ गए थे, सो गए थे और शेल्टर ले लिए थे और इस तरह से गाड़ियाँ रुकी और फिर अपनी गाड़ियों में बैठ के लोग निकल गए। हमारे साथ जो पायलट थी वो भी गाड़ी से निकली और यहाँ आपको ऐसे लोगों के साथ में होना है जो आपको बता सके कि आपकी जान या आपका शरीर कैसे सुरक्षित रहेगा। तो इस तरह की स्थिति लगातार यहाँ वॉर जोन में आपको देखने को मिलेगा। न्यूज़ 18 इंडिया की टीम आपको एश्केलॉन से हर एक रिपोर्ट दे रही है। एश्केलॉन में लगातार मिसाइल से हमला किया जा रहा है हमास की तरफ से और ये कल हमले की तस्वीरें ये देख सकते हैं किस तरह से यहाँ गिरा था वो मिसाइल और उसके बाद जो उसका असर होता है, स्प्लिंटर्स होते हैं, उससे जो कण निकलते हैं, उससे जो प्रभाव होता है मिसाइल गिरने के बाद।
רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
يصدر من رعيم باتجاه قطاع غزة. ها هم جنودنا الذين أثخنوا في عدونا.
Good evening, welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. Israel is continuing with its offensive against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Over 1,500 civilians have been killed, including 900 Israelis. It's clear from Israel's actions, its preparations, that the objective is to destroy Hamas. 300,000 reservists have been called in. to raise the cost of deterrence so high, as Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, said in his address to the nation just on the day of the attack, that Hamas shouldn't ever dare to attack Israel like it did this past weekend. But in the process, Israel runs the risk of what is a disproportionate response in which civilians are indiscriminately targeted. On Brass Tacks tonight, we have